But back to this whole embrace erase thing, how it brings up all these, what I label as defensive mechanisms built into our conditioning that create levels of negative connotation around certain words alone and certain words combined. It makes us conjure up images and create implications about things. But people don't look at it close enough, because usually things people don't believe, they don't know that they actually do. Because a lot of people, they full-heartedly accept the idea of sacrifice and how the dynamics of it take place. I mean, that's the same thing, really. As far as like embrace erase, you embrace sacrificing or compromising yourself or something else or someone else, depending on how you analogically look at the dynamic. So it's all about accepting and embracing the situation to erase another situation. It's not to say you accept something into your life and have it consume you. That's not what embrace erase means. It's just the polar opposite of the dynamics of what you fight you become. That's all. Because I mean, everybody embraces that because it sounds better. So it never leads to anything looking at it that way, because you have to look at both sides of everything and wonder what the third side is. And then if there's three more, in my opinion, that's a problem. And then if there's three more representing the thing, you know, it's like three more on top of it. That maybe that represents as above, so below, because there would have to be an etherical thing in between. So it would be divine, perhaps. I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. What I have labeled earlier today in my head, the ultimate divide, really, with our culture, within our culture, and in comparison to others, is the simple way of how we look at things. Where you become different, in my opinion, where things kind of start changing socially, mentally, emotionally, enough to where it spills over into your behavior and circumstances, is when, I can't illustrate it because it's just audio right now, but it's like you got two fingers pointing out, and very rarely on a large scale, especially, like, it's just like a never thing as far as a large scale in our country. And that's my opinion, and I have a lot of experiential overlap as far as coming to this conclusion. It's like everybody's got two fingers pointing out, and that's how they operate as far as dynamics of everything. And then very rarely do they have two fingers pointed back at themselves. So it's almost to say that the chances of them pointing one finger at themselves and on the external is just very minimal. So that's why all this silly fucking shit happens, because our minds are how they are, man. Like our pieces of the mind are just, it's crazy because it's never on the same page. It's all individualistic. And then when you have all these different individuals who have differing levels of potential of influencing the masses, it gets really wacky, man, because it's like, just think of dreams, for example. They don't make sense. People go to psychologists so they analyze these dreams to get the message. People have all these crazy fucking things going on inside of them that they don't ever have two fingers pointed at themselves, much less a finger pointed at them and the external, in which you start making correlations and identifying synchronicities and a lot of nefarious surveillance things. So it's like, when they get in these influential positions and they only have these two fingers pointed out, they emit all the energy from within them into the external world. And when they're in an influential position, it caters to that way of thinking. So you get all these people debating, and it's just crazy, man. That's why I'm saying that's where the divide comes in between like a different way of thinking. But yeah, back to the whole perspective thing with the goggles analogy. It's more than just perspective and viewpoints. It's like almost like personalities, because it's different yous from different times in the past inside of you and in other people, literally and symbolically and artificially. Like it's a whole lot of shit going on all the time. Not like sci-fi bullshit level, just real life synchronicity and planned out, programmed bullshit. And yeah, a little bit of sci-fi crazy sounding shit too. I mean, it's all going on. You get used to certain things being true, but I don't know, man. It's hard for me to say what's helpful. It really is. With something so pervasive and dominating and influential, it's beyond contending with it. It's the type of thing that regulates and engineers society, man. I mean, what the fuck do I expect? Or what does anyone else expect as far as attempting to combat something like this? As far as it goes, is survival. As far as I see it, this far into things. But as I said, I can't really say what's helpful, but what seems helpful to me and what I do to survive these things is I attempt to not go any further back than my area of covertly operating with the awareness that I had. I try not to find myself within the realms of a previous self before that point in my life, often, because then I can have that awareness, regardless of what level of awareness. It's still developed a way of operating to where it's still a safe zone, because people aren't aware of when I was at that point. They don't take the time to figure that out, and they probably won't. So whenever they put that on them, I'm their ally, even when they're my enemy, because it's like I set it up that way, man. It really is that way. It doesn't make me safe. It doesn't mean they can't harm me, but it's like there's certain things that I can identify that I put there for my future self, for when it's within me and from when it's within other people. Pretty trippy, man. I could be way off base with this as well, but it's just something I've been wanting to take note of. I see so much every day, representations of things and things representing what's happened. It's just too vast. All of these things. The most compelling is my own perceptions within me, especially. It's interesting that it's like I have all these different goggles I can put on to realistically portray the situation. Don't ever get it twisted like I'm like in a fantasy world. It's just like I can look at it this way or I can look at it that way. And then I can look at it a third way. And then I can look at it 6 ways, 9 ways. It's just all these different things going on. And it's also a trip when you see other people doing what they do. And in that process, which I don't care to specify at this moment because I myself know what I'm speaking on, you see yourself in them, or a previous self or a persona that has been portrayed by either yourself or someone else, it puts me in the mind of something that Manly Palmer Hall mentioned about redeeming your own underworld, because it's like you have all these things inside of you that you have to overcome, and it's like you see them in the external world as well. And everybody wants to be philosophical or scientific or mix those together and talk so deeply about cause and effect or karma, and constantly say what you fight you become, but they don't take into consideration the polarization that they believe so heavily in as far as cause and effect and opposites and positives and negatives. And it's like, what you embrace you erase. If people in this reality believe so heavily in something, then it would only logically lead to the conclusion that the opposite would have to be true as well, especially when, regardless of what anyone believes, that's just the way the universal laws work. I don't want to say they take it too literally when they hear what you embrace you erase. It's just they automatically conjure up certain images. They automatically conjure up certain images that are conditioning and indoctrination and culture instill in us. And it is dangerous because it leads you to believe that it's okay to embrace certain beliefs and then partake in them. But it's a difference of an opinion when it comes to what someone means if they decide to start saying this to other people, when they say what you embrace you erase. Because I'm strictly speaking on just having the perspective and point of view of someone who believes that whatever you put your bad judgment on is what can potentially be your enemy, because it's what you don't want to represent you. Like, if you are ashamed to be accused of something, it's because you have such strong emotions against that specific thing or label you're being accused of being. And it's not to say that that's the wrong thing to do. I mean, if people are accusing me of being something, I mean, I've been there and I'm potentially still am there. People have every right to react negatively to a situation of being accused that there's something that they're not, that they have such strong feelings against. However, if they psychologically prepare themselves and they're in a survival mode of operating, it leads you to desensitizing yourself. For example, there's all these different ways of explaining it and souping it up to make it sound professional or comforting to someone, but it comes down to you're surviving because you're not assimilating to a system that oppresses other people. And that just sounds so political and fucking pansy-like, really, but it's the truth, man. It really is. I mean, a lot of this shit is just way over the top. It's beyond social conditioning or engineering. The past few times I've took a notion to do this, I've drawn blanks like I've never before. I'm still noticing that whole cycle I spoke of about my thoughts becoming more and more complex over time and then climaxing and going back to a basic level of thinking again. I'm still noticing that, and I've noticed I'm becoming less emotionally invested in doing this all together, but I still recognize and believe in the value of it, so I'm going to continue. Could just be that I'm an asshole and I just like to hear myself talk. which is a good thing, I guess, since, you know, I'm so to myself these days. One of my electronic devices fried, so the same thing could happen to this. And within that whole cycle of my thoughts climaxing and going back to basic levels and things like that, it still has no control over me taking the notion to go to a location and basically just do the routine that I used to do while doing this. And that in itself is proof of a lot of things, in my opinion, along with all the external things that happened here over the past year or so with this taking place, of me making these recordings and coming over here to this specific location walking. It just became more and more difficult to do it, which makes no sense within the natural realms of things. It just doesn't compute. It's not that I'm running out of things to say. It's nowhere near that. It's that my content's getting deeper, and I've been doing this for so long that I've developed a routine in which is capitalized upon. But I got a lot of ways that I hope I never forget that I can't mention that keep me functioning. So a lot of it's just who I am. It's kind of just embedded in me to do how I do. So it's just inevitable for certain things to pop up as guidestones as far as progress. And the more and more this process repeats, the more strength is gained in the long run. Plus, it's all about perception. Most of these challenges in this life that we live. Something really important about this that covers a lot of areas, but a very specific element of this is about making you come to the conclusion, oh, I just did all that shit for nothing. I just did all that for nothing. But, you know, it's just another form of setting you up for a letdown, you know. But you didn't ever do anything for nothing, I promise. Everything is for a reason. Beyond the cliche, man. You don't always just do something for one reason. There's never just one reason for doing anything, even if you think there's only one reason. So especially when you know it's more than one reason you're doing something, you won't come to that conclusion nearly as often. That whole, oh, I just did all that for nothing. I should have, because the goal is for you to stick with that conclusion. I just did all this shit for nothing. So you will go to that next step and say, I should have just never did none of it. That's where the regret creeps in, and then your low vibration is stuck on you. All the experiences, whether they be good or bad, would not have been experienced. And you don't learn any other way other than experience truly. So it's like, man, I didn't do nothing for no reason. I never do anything for no fucking reason. Neither does anybody else. So I ain't tripping, bro. I mean, I was. Whenever I'm tripping, I'll fucking yell about it for 30 minutes, maybe an hour and a half. But after that, generally and honestly, I'm over it. I am. I'm just dealing with everything second nature because it's become a habit. After that, I'm just regular default mode.